Indonesia is the fourth largest country in the world, and its capital, Jakarta, is home to over 32 million people, making it the second largest metro region on Earth. But Jakarta is sinking fast, so Indonesia is doing something wild, building an entirely new capital city from scratch, deep in the jungles of Borneo. The problem? That new city is already turning into a disaster. So why is Jakarta failing, and what's going so wrong in Nusantara? As always, it begins with Indonesia's unique geographic constraints. Indonesia is the world's largest archipelagic country, made up of over 17,000 islands straddling the equator between the Pacific and Indian Oceans. This means that Indonesia sits on one of the most critical crossroads of maritime trade and historic cultural exchange, occupying a very valuable position between East Asia, Australia, and India. But its geography is not defined only by its size. It's largely defined by its fragmentation. The country stretches over 5,000 kilometers from west to east, with islands ranging from massive landmasses like Sumatra, Java, Borneo, which is shared with Malaysia and Brunei, and Sulawesi, to smaller island groups like the Malukus and the remote province of Papua. This fractured geography has created profound logistical challenges throughout its history, such as difficulties in governance, infrastructure, transportation, and even national cohesion. But it's also led to some incredible biodiversity and cultural diversity, as each island and region developed its own distinct language, customs, and identity. In many ways, it's shocking that Indonesia is a single country at all. But one thing they all share is a particularly volatile geography. You see, Indonesia sits along the Pacific Ring of Fire, which gives the country its rugged and beautiful topography, its fertile volcanic soils, and of course, its frequent seismic activities. Volcanoes dominate much of the interior of Java and Bali, and earthquakes and tsunamis remain a persistent threat. In fact, Indonesia is home to one of the world's few supervolcanoes. Around 75,000 years ago, the Toba supervolcano, which sits under Lake Toba on the island of Sumatra, erupted, causing a 10-year volcanic winter, which may have endangered humans in their very early stage of development. Suffice it to say, Indonesia is a country defined by volcanoes, and its particular volcanoes have played a huge role in how humans have evolved over the millennia. Overall, the country's climate is tropical and humid, with monsoon cycles shaping its agriculture and seasonal rhythms. Java, in particular, is a highly fertile island and is the most densely populated part of Indonesia. It's also home to the country's sprawling capital city, Jakarta. Jakarta is located on the northwest coast of Java, facing the Java Sea, and prior to it being the capital of a major world country, it was a pretty modest port town called Sunda Kelapa, which was part of the Hindu Sunda Kingdom. In fact, it wouldn't be until European colonization that Jakarta would begin to become the megacity we see today. This started after Sunda Kelapa was seized and renamed Batavia by the Dutch in 1619. Under Dutch colonial rule, Batavia became the administrative and economic center of the Dutch East Indies, the Netherlands' vast Southeast Asian colonial empire. The city's low-lying position made it ideal as a port city, and given its valuable location at the confluence of three large regions, this would directly influence the growth and wealth of Indonesia and Batavia. But given that it's so low-lying, this also means that it's vulnerable to flooding, something that will become very important later on in this video. After Indonesia gained independence in 1945, Batavia was renamed Jakarta and quickly grew into a megacity. Its population exploded as Indonesia industrialized and urbanized. As wealth concentrated in the city, Indonesians migrated to the city from rural provinces in search of work and opportunity. As such, Jakarta became Indonesia's political heart, its economic engine, and a symbol of its post-colonial nationhood. But Jakarta's rapid rise came with deep structural issues. Unlike many planned capitals, Jakarta developed chaotically, often without cohesive city planning or investment in long-term infrastructure. And as the country's economy grew, so did Jakarta's congestion, inequality, and environmental strain. The city became emblematic of Indonesia's growth, ambitious and dynamic, but stretched to its limit by the weight of its own complexity. The geography that made Jakarta so attractive as a coastal trading hub has become a liability in the modern era. And those tensions have only worsened in recent decades. Fresh air, sunshine, and good food. That's spring. And HelloFresh helps me fit delicious home-cooked meals into my busy schedule with ease. They curate incredible weekly recipes like pasta primavera, chicken Dijon, and pecan-crusted trout. Plus, for 2025, their new ready-made meals are chef-crafted and ready to eat in just 3 minutes, giving you more time for everything else. As a content creator focused on geography, history, and travel, my schedule is packed, which is why I'm a huge HelloFresh fan. Because HelloFresh makes it simple to eat well without spending hours in the kitchen. So feel great with meals that fit your spring schedule and make the season even more delicious. Go to hellofresh.com/geography10fm now to get 10 free meals with a free item for life. That's 1 item per box with active subscription. Free meals are applied as a discount on your first box, and it's for new subscribers only. Varies by plan. Don't miss out on America's #1 meal kit. Right now, Jakarta is sinking. The city is, unfortunately, built on a low-lying coastal plain, where much of the city sits less than 10 meters above sea level. And in some northern neighborhoods, the land is already below it. The city's geography, flat, marshy, and prone to flooding, has always made it vulnerable, but rapid urbanization has accelerated the crisis. Over the last few decades, Jakarta's population has exploded, putting immense pressure on its infrastructure. When factoring in the entire metropolitan area, Jakarta is the second largest metro region, with nearly 34 million people. This would put it just behind Tokyo's 39 million people. But unlike Tokyo, which was home to millions of people as early as 1750, Jakarta didn't hit 1 million people until about 1945. So its growth has been explosive compared to most cities around the world. And at the end of the day, there's really no way to really plan for that amount of growth. So, in response to limited access to piped water, Jakarta's newly migrated millions of residents began drilling illegal wells, tapping into the city's aquifers. This came with a nasty side effect because as the groundwater was drained, the land began to sink. In fact, some areas of the city are now sinking by as much as 10 to 20 centimeters per year. By 2050, just 25 years from today, it's projected that nearly a third of Jakarta could be entirely underwater. Compounding this issue is Jakarta's inadequate drainage system, clogged canals, and an aging flood control network. Given that Jakarta sits in a tropical region with a distinct wet and dry season, seasonal monsoons regularly inundate the city, and climate change is only increasing the severity of these events. Together with rising sea levels, heavier rains, and worsening storms means the city now experiences floods that displace thousands of people almost every year. At the same time, Jakarta's air pollution, chaotic traffic, and overcrowding make it one of the least livable capitals in the world. The weight of administrative, economic, and population pressures all converge here, making the city increasingly difficult to govern. All of this combined makes for a city that is, quite frankly, challenging to see a future for. And because of these challenges, Indonesia has been forced to consider something radical, moving its capital entirely to a brand new city. In 2019, then-President Joko Widodo announced that the seat of Indonesia's government would shift from Jakarta to a brand new city called Nusantara, which would be built from scratch on the island of Borneo, in the province of East Kalimantan. This new capital would not replace Jakarta as a financial center, but it would assume the role of national government headquarters, housing the president, parliament, ministries, and key administrative functions. Of course, the logic to move the city was partly geographic. East Kalimantan is far from earthquake zones, less prone to flooding, and located roughly in the geographic center of the Indonesian archipelago. But the move was also symbolic. It was meant to signal a more balanced, forward-looking Indonesia, one that didn't revolve around an overcrowded Java. In fact, Nusantara was pitched as a smart, sustainable city powered by renewable energy and designed with green spaces, efficient public transport, and high-speed digital infrastructure. In theory, it would avoid the problems that plagued Jakarta by being built with the future in mind. But from the beginning, critics questioned whether the plan was realistic, especially given the vast cost, environmental impact, and political motivations driving the move. Nusantara was meant to be Indonesia's grand urban reset, but the dream has not gone according to plan. This is for a myriad of reasons, but not least is the physical geography of Indonesia's new capital. You see, the site of the city itself, deep within the rainforests of East Kalimantan, poses immense logistical and environmental challenges. Building a new city in such a remote and ecologically sensitive area has required massive deforestation, displacing local wildlife and threatening the habitat of endangered species like orangutans. Indigenous communities have also raised concerns, fearing that they would be pushed aside or excluded from decision-making and land use, something that largely turned out to be true. Rather than relying on local labor, and thus increasing employment for locals of Kalimantan, the government brought in over 100,000 Indonesian and migrant laborers to build. And, as you can imagine, this has come at an immense price tag. Let's get straight to the point. The cost of Nusantara is staggering. Estimates have ballooned to over $30 billion, a number that could rise even higher with delays and inflation. And while the government insists that most of the funding will come from private investment, these investors have been slow to commit. In fact, it appears that many are wary of putting money into a politically driven project with an uncertain return. Construction timelines have slipped, targets have been missed, and much of what's been built so far remains skeletal or symbolic. Even as the government pushes forward, laying cornerstones, hosting ceremonies, and promising that bureaucrats and people will relocate, there is widespread skepticism that the city will ever function as a true capital in the near term. At the same time, Jakarta remains the economic and cultural core of the country. No serious plan exists to relocate the millions of jobs, institutions, or infrastructure that have been built there over generations. Nusantara may one day house a parliament building and a presidential residence, but real power and activity are likely to remain in Java for decades. The project also reflects a broader tension in Indonesian politics, a top-down vision of modernization that often sidelines local voices in favor of national spectacle. Of course, Indonesia is not the first country to attempt this kind of bold urban pivot. Brazil built Brasilia in the 1960s to shift power inward from its coastal cities, hoping to better integrate with the vast interior of the country. Nigeria moved its capital from Lagos to Abuja for similar reasons, citing overcrowding, neutrality, and centrality. Kazakhstan famously transformed a remote provincial city into its gleaming capital, now called Astana, filling it with futuristic architecture to symbolize national ambition. Even Myanmar attempted a dramatic capital relocation to Naypyidaw, though its sprawling, often empty highways became more infamous than inspiring. These cities all share a common thread. They were meant to be statements of control, unity, and modernity, but their long-term success has varied wildly. Brasilia and Abuja eventually established themselves as legitimate seats of power, though both struggled with inequality and accessibility. Astana dazzles on paper, but lacks organic civil life. Naypyidaw remains a capital in name, but functions more like a government fortress than a city. Indonesia's new capital, Nusantara, still in its infancy, teeters somewhere in between these examples, and its future depends not just on construction progress, but on whether people, civil servants, families, businesses, actually choose to move there. If they don't, Nusantara may end up less a national project and more a monument to political overreach. Today, Nusantara is not quite the capital, but it also kind of is. Some government functions, such as hosting celebrations of the country's independence, have been moved to Nusantara. Others, mostly the day-to-day activities of running the country, have remained in Jakarta. In this way, Indonesia feels a bit like a split country. More to that point, while many buildings such as the Presidential Palace, ministry offices, and residential towers have been built, the city's actual population remains below 500,000. Perhaps not terrible considering it's a brand new city, but still rather anemic compared to the massive entity that is Jakarta. For former President Joko Widodo, Nusantara was meant to be his legacy. But with his term over and doubts about the city's success growing, the future of Nusantara is increasingly unclear. Some fear it will become a white elephant, half-built, underused, and forgotten. Others see it as a well-intentioned idea, executed in the wrong place, at the wrong time, and for the wrong reasons. Either way, Nusantara now stands as a cautionary tale about the limits of building a nation's future on symbolic geography alone. Indonesia has a fascinating geographic problem. Its primary city and current capital is sinking. And yet, relocating its capital to somewhere more geographically stable has turned out to be a bit of a boondoggle. Where does the country go from here? No one can truly say. Speaking of going places, this week I'm exploring the far southwestern region of Australia, a gorgeous but very isolated part of the world. So go check that out over on my other travel channel. And yes, you're not mistaken, I am back in my own studio, but only for a few weeks because then I'm off to Europe. I hope you enjoyed learning all about Indonesia and its capital city issues. If you did, you might be interested in this video on why Europe might freeze in the near future. Thanks for watching, see you next time.